So welcome to Unbroken, the safe place for male survivor podcast. Because every male survivor deserves hope, healing, support, and a BMW. And here's your male survivor, leadership coach, and hypnotherapist, Thomas Edward. Place and space for male survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Hey guys, it is so great to be back. So I took a little time off. Well, only 4 weeks, but sometimes you just got to recharge. And once again, since I heard the music right there, I'm like, yes, here we go once again. And then I had an opportunity to have some clients here for over the past weeks, working on some stuff, doing some hypnotherapy, and just seeing the wonderful results that guys are getting. Those that have decided, you know what, we can do this. And so, and it's interesting. They all kind of say the same thing. They're like, there is nothing out there like this. And I just beam whenever I hear that, because I think of the 25 plus years of working and putting all these things together. And they're like, yep, this is not like therapy. It's like, they're like, man, finally someone who's giving us the tools, the strategies, and all these different, and there's so many that you can actually just pull from. Yeah, it's great. So it's great to be back. Hey, shout out to those in the UK. So followers that sent me a few emails, and you know who you are right there in Thames. Thank you so much for that. I just want to let you know that really, I'm going to say, that feeds me, that encourages me. Because oftentimes you're here, you're putting your heart into this, you're putting the information out, and you're hoping that it helps people, but you never hear anything. Oftentimes, no one says, hey, man, that podcast was, oh man, I just learned so much from it, or I was able to use some of the things that you talked about and they really helped me. So when you get an email like that, it's like you treasure it and you lavish it, especially when someone says, oh my goodness, it's like you were sitting in the room with me as I was working with this person, and they were doing exactly the stuff that you said in the podcast. It was just manifesting, and I could just see it, and it was so nice to understand. And so that's what this is about, though. This is helping you to know that there are other options, that there are ways, and you guys know that I use an integrative approach. So we're throwing everything that we can at you, but you get to pick and choose what works, and we get to tweak it. So today, I'm going to say this might be actually a little bit of a series. I know you guys know me, and there's no way I'm going to get through all this in one podcast. So we'll probably divide it up into, I'm going to say, different sections. Now, if you were to ask me, it's like, okay, Coach T, what's going to be the title? I have no idea, but I know what I want to cover, because this is something that's come up. And I'm going to say maybe 8 or 10 things that partners, spouses, loved ones, family, whatever, that they experience when they're loving a male survivor, when they're part of the family, when they're your spouse, when they're your partner, when you're your significant other, whatever. And so if this is you and you're listening, and that's you're trying to love this survivor, but you're pulling your hair out because you don't know what's going on. You're like, am I going crazy? No, you're not going crazy, but we might share what it's kind of like to actually love a male survivor. And I hope that what it does is it gives you a little bit of insight, one, into the world, and then also at the same time, it gives you the ability for those of you that are supporting male survivors, living with male survivors, just a little bit more of an understanding so that you can also flourish in the relationship. And so I think that that's really important. So that's kind of the theme that we're going to take for the next couple of podcast. Now, the reason I want to talk about this, because this is something that I'm going to say that confuses almost every partner, spouse, loved one, family members of those that are living with male survivors. Closeness, it's not about sex, it's not attraction, it's not effort, but really it's closeness. Closeness is the thing that is actually important when we think about this. Because what most partners, family members, spouses experience isn't really, I'm going to say, distance all the time. It's something much more confusing than that. It's connection that suddenly disappears. And so you get moments where the survivor, the one that you love, he's open, he's present, he's even warm. And just when you feel like, you know what, wow, we're finally getting somewhere, something shifts and he's gone, right? Not physically, but emotionally. And what makes this so hard is this. You didn't do anything wrong, but it still feels like you've lost him. So then as a partner, as a spouse, as a family member, loved ones, friends, you just start asking, like, wait a minute, what just happened? Or, was that too much? Did I say the wrong thing? Did I push too far? And the thing is, if no one explains this pattern, then what happens is you spend years trying to fix something that isn't what you think it is. So I'm going to share with you guys experience. And so oftentimes when I'm working with survivors, sometimes I get to work with their spouses, partners, significant others. And I'll ask them, I say, just share with me kind of what's going on for you. Write it down. Because then there are other individuals also that are experiencing that, partners and spouses and loved ones. And so then sometimes that information really can help them. So here's one. And if this is you, you might be like, whoa, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. Okay, then hopefully that will help you to understand.
I don't understand it. That's the hardest part. It's not like he's distant all the time. If he was, I think I'd at least know what I was dealing with. But it's not like that. There are moments where he's there, like really there. We'll be talking, laughing, sitting close, and I can feel it. Connection. And I relax. I let my guard down because I think, okay, this is us. This is what we're supposed to feel like.
And then it just disappears. Not because of a fight, not because of something obvious. It's like something inside him shuts off. He'll get quiet, pull back, sometimes physically, sometimes just emotionally. And I can feel the difference instantly. So I start trying to figure it out. Did I say something wrong? Did I move too fast? Did I expect too much?
I'll ask him, "Are you okay?" And he always says, "Yeah, I'm fine." But he's not, and I know he's not. And that's the part that messes with me.
Because now I'm sitting next to someone I love, and I feel completely alone. And over time, I've started noticing something about myself.
I hesitate now, before I reach for him, before I open up, before I lean in. Because part of me is always thinking, is this the moment where he's going to pull away again? And I hate that. Because I don't want to feel like that in my own relationship. I love him, but I don't understand him. And I don't know how to fix something I can't see.
All right. So that's oftentimes when I'm working with male survivors and then the partners, the spouses, the loved ones in the family. These are the things that they actually share with me. So let's talk a little bit about this to help you to understand hopefully a little bit more. Let's even talk about the root, the CSA root. So CSA just simply means childhood sexual abuse. And then if you hear me say CSA, it just means male childhood sexual abuse. So let's talk a little bit about what's underneath this. And so this pattern didn't start in your relationship. It actually started much earlier. And so what I want to say with the sexual abuse, of course, and so what I want you to understand is that oftentimes you're like, okay, this closeness, I'm really having a hard time with this closeness. What often happens is the idea of closeness, it actually got paired with danger. Now, in a healthy development, closeness teaches us different things. It teaches us safety, it teaches us connection, and it teaches us trust. However, when sexual abuse is involved, so in sexual abuse, closeness often becomes the doorway to harm, because that's what actually happened during the sexual abuse. And so now guess what? The nervous system has learned something. And so the nervous system for the survivor has learned, hey, when someone gets close, that means that something bad can happen, because that's their experience, especially if this happens during early formative years in childhood when the abuse takes place, where you're just starting to learn about trust, where you're just starting to learn about connection, and you believe that you're safe, right? The people that are around you, they're grown, their responsibility is to take care of you. And so that's where the trust builds. But now when this violation happens, the nervous system is going in the opposite direction. And now it's associating anything that feels like this idea of closeness as danger. Now, the second thing we have to think about is, so the body learned exposure equals a loss of control. Now, I want you to hear me. So the body has learned that exposure equals loss of control. So during the sexual abuse, there's no pacing, there's no consent, and there's no control. Someone else is controlling your body. And so control has a whole different idea in the mind of the survivor. So the body stores, you know what? When I'm open, it means that I'm not safe, right? So when I'm vulnerable, that means that I'm not safe. And so, like they said, I don't know what happened. He's there, and then he just shuts down. Where there's something in the environment, but make the survivor feels like that they are not safe. And when they're not safe, then that means that they are not in control. Here's the third thing I'm going to say to think about, and that is for the survivor to have emotional access. For us, oftentimes, it means or it becomes a threat. And so it's not just the physical closeness, it's the emotional closeness too. So being seen, remember we talked about exposure, that's exposure, right? And that means that I'm not safe. Being seen, being known. Oh, if they really, really know me. Okay, that's a threat, because that's emotional access to me, of course, which is closeness, and being vulnerable. So all of that can trigger this whole idea when we talk about exposure, and that exposure, of course, is equal to not being safe, that it actually is a threat. And so exposure in his system means risk. And this is why oftentimes it's hard for us when we're trying to develop new relationships to put ourselves out there, because that means I have to expose myself. I have to be vulnerable. I have to allow myself to be seen and to be known. And that means risk. And where there's risk, that means that there's no control. It's going to be more challenging for me to actually try to control the environment if it is a risky environment. All right, here's the fourth thing for us to think about. So for the male survivor, the nervous system prioritizes protection over connection. Okay, so our nervous system, what comes first, what it prioritizes is protection over connection. That's why we talked about safety is really important. So even if he consciously wants to be close, his body is asking a different question. And it's just simply asking the question, is this safe? Is this person safe? Is this relationship safe? Is this environment safe? And so if the answer is uncertain, then guess what? He shuts down, right? Because we got to be safe. So if there's no certainty, if there's risk, then we just shut down because we're not going to take that chance. All right. Now, what happens when we're talking about some of the reinforcing factors? It's like, well, maybe as the person who loves the survivor, you're like, well, why does this keep happening? Well, over time, this pattern just gets stronger and stronger. It's almost like a negative reinforcement. So in order to stay safe, we don't take the risk, we don't open up. And so even though that's negative, it keeps us safe. So we continue to do it. We continue to do the pattern because that's what the brain is telling you, to stay safe. So avoidance works. Now, it only works short term, but it works. So he pulls away, right? And once he pulls away, guess what? His anxiety drops. Okay, now for him, that's good. So then what his brain, with this patterning, what is it learning? Well, the brain is learning that distance equals relief. Okay, with the avoidance. So my brain is still on the reward system. It's being rewarded. And the reward that it's getting is when I'm distant emotionally, or there's no risk, that there's actually relief. Now, what happens when we're talking about the partner? So the partner, you're like, okay, well, I don't want them to be, distant. So guess what you do? So you try and move closer. And so, but remember, distance equals relief. So now we've got this kind of chaser pursuer, which is actually going on. So you're trying to move closer to the person, and guess what? Then he just pulls away. Okay, this makes sense. So it's kind of the dance that's taking place. Okay, because his system is reading this as pressure. And so then he just continues to pull further and further away. Now, here's the thing you have to understand. The male survivor, he doesn't understand his own reactions. Okay, I'm going to say if he hasn't done the work, he doesn't understand his own reaction, which creates confusion and shame. And so then you start asking, well, why? Why do I do this? Well, what happens, we have the shame reinforces the cycle. So afterward, he may feel broken. He might feel guilty. Oh, I feel so guilty, from, just distancing myself from the partner. And then he feels frustrated. But this makes him more likely to try and stay open the next time, but then he still closes down because that's the pattern, right? And so that means that the brain is trying to protect him. The nervous system is trying to protect him. So it's not a moral failing. It is actually the nervous system, the body, seeing something as a threat and attempting to protect itself. So then we're going to say adult impact. What this creates, of course, in relationships. So think about all those things that are going on inside a child. Okay, that's the male survivor. But just think about, so you grew up with all those different type of things. Those different type of beliefs were being formed. Risk, safety, closeness, connection, trust. And so now here you are as an adult. And then what happens, it just becomes a predictable rhythm. So whenever there's connection, we've learned we just go into the withdrawal cycle. Okay? Closeness feels good until it doesn't. So then we get, the partner confusion. So now the partner feels rejected. The partner feels unsure. The spouse feels emotionally disconnected. And so now what happens is, I'm going to say the double whammy. So now we have self-protection on both sides. So the male survivor, he's withdrawing from you, and now you're hesitating to either engage or to be close to the male survivor. And then what does that create? Well, now we've got loss of just natural intimacy. So that connection between something, right, that both people are trying to manage. Now we have a loss of just that natural intimacy that would be there in that relationship. And now we're not experiencing. All right. Now, if you guys haven't listened to me before, those of you, if this is kind of your first time, because you're like, oh, my the male survivor, he's like, look, you got to go up and listen to Coach T. He's created this podcast for, partners and spouses and loved ones. Okay. I try and keep the neuroscience somewhat to a minimum because I'm a neuroscience geek, but it does explain a lot of things. All right. So I'm going to just go a little bit into the neuroscience insight on why this feels so strong. Okay. So first of all, realize this is not a personality issue. This is actually conditioning. It's conditioning. All right. So let's talk about the amygdala. So remember, well, I guess if you listen to it the first time, you're not remembering. But the amygdala is kind of this little almond-shaped thing, we'll say, in the brain. And we're going to call it the threat detector. Okay, so the amygdala, threat detection. So the amygdala is always scanning for familiarity. Oh, yeah, I've seen that before. Oh, yeah, I've done that before. Oh, yeah, I know what that is, right? Now, if closeness feels familiar to a past harm, then what happens is it triggers the threat response. It's like, oh, this feels kind of close when so-and-so did whatever to me, right? And so that's that amygdala threat detection. And so it's triggering a response. Then what happens from a neuroscience perspective, you got the nervous system activating, right? So then what happens as the closeness increases, the person's heart rate starts to rise. The muscles start to tighten. The emotional access starts to drop, right? Now, this is not withdrawal by choice. This is the body just going into, we're going to call it autonomic activation. So it's so used to doing this, when it just detects that threat, the fire alarm, it just goes at the first sign, whatever of smoke or the hint of whatever carbon monoxide, whatever analogy that you want to use. Now, the other thing that's going on is that the trauma memory, there's a trauma memory without context. And so the body is remembering something, even if his mind doesn't connect it clearly. Okay. And so just think about, I don't have all the answers, but this thing feels a little bit familiar and it feels a little bit like this that was in the past. And so the alarm goes off, whoop, whoop, whoop. And we're not taking the time to really find out, is that it? We don't have the context. We just know that feeling, it feels like it did because that's familiar. And so then the reaction feels sudden. It feels confusing. It feels like it's come out of nowhere. Okay, here's the other part when we're talking about the neuroscience. So remember we talked about the distance. Well, what happens from this neuroscience perspective, the distance now restores regulation. And not dysregulation, but regulation. So when the survivor, when he pulls away, his system calms down. So his heart rate starts to, his muscles start to loosen, and then the emotional access might come a little bit online. And so the brain actually reinforces this because that's the safety. It reinforces actually pulling away because like that works. All right. So you're probably getting this and you're like, okay, wait a minute. So what am I supposed to do? All right, so let's talk about a few, I'll say, strategies. So what might actually help you as a partner? Now, here's the thing. You don't fix this, okay? The first thing you want to realize, you are not there to fix your spouse, your partner. If you're a loved one, you're not there to fix this, okay, by chasing whatever the connection is. because they can continually feel unsafe. But we're going to say, enhance this by changing how the moment is actually handled. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to name the moment without pressure. Okay, so instead of these words, what's wrong? Okay, now when you say that to a survivor, you're bringing up guilt and shame, because one of the things is, because they've been sexually abused, they feel that there is something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with them. They're in survival mode, but that's what they're thinking. And as soon as you use those words and saying what's wrong, you've already triggered something, because you've named the moment and you've put the pressure behind it, right? So instead of what's wrong, or if you start demanding, talk to me. Okay, we don't need any imperative commands. And you're like, okay, I'm just telling them to talk with me. Yes, don't. Okay, because once again, you're doing the pressure. All right, but maybe you can try. You know what? I can feel a little bit of a shift, and then say, but we're okay. We're okay. I'm just feeling a little bit of a shift. So what that actually does is that just starts to reduce the pressure. And so I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm not commanding you to talk to me, right? But you're saying, you know what, I can feel a little bit of a shift, but we're okay. We're okay. Now, you want to make sure that you stay present without pursuing. So remember we talked about, the chasing, pursuing. So you're pursuing and it feels like they're chasing you. And you're not really, but you're trying to find out, well, what's wrong? What's going on? What did I do? Okay. So you want to stay present without pursuing. So you don't leave. Okay. So you don't just walk away. Okay. And then at the same time, you don't push, right? So there's a balance that has to take place. And that's because closeness doesn't require more than I can handle. Okay, I want you to hear that. Closeness doesn't require more than I can handle. Okay, so that's the reason we're not pursuing. That's the reason we're not, running into the room. We're giving that space as much as possible. Okay, now we have to make sure that we are not personalizing the withdrawal. And I find this so many times for spouses and partners and loved ones and families, and especially when this is going on around kids. And as kids, we personalize so many things because we believe that the world revolves around us. But as adults, we have to realize that we can't personalize the withdrawal. This is really critical. So if you start thinking, well, he's pulling away from me. Okay, now hear what I said, because I'm starting to personalize. He's pulling away from me. We need to shift it to, okay, well, something in him just doesn't feel safe right now. Do you see what we just did? Okay, so listen once again. He's pulling away from me. Okay, so I've personalized whatever the withdrawal. And so like, there's something in him that just doesn't feel safe right now. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're not personalizing the withdrawal. Then we have to rebuild closeness in smaller doses. And this is really key. This is really important. Remember, we talked about that familiarity. We talked about the amygdala with this kind of threat detector. And so if you're doing something to intensity, you're trying to build that closeness with intensity, you're going to push the person further away. Okay. So not intensity, not depth. However, consistency is important. Smaller doses, but being consistent. What happens is when you're consistent, it starts to set up a pattern, of course, in the brain. And so now the brain is not surprised because it's seeing the pattern. So if you're doing this in small doses, the brain realizes like, oh, okay, yeah, we're familiar with this. And this is not some overwhelming situation, but this person always delivers it just in small doses. Okay. So short, safe moments of connection, right? And so these are going to increase our closeness as opposed to, I'm going to say, intense emotional spikes. Okay. So here's my time always goes so fast. And I'm like, I thought I was going to cover at least 2 or 3 of these, and it's already 30 minutes. All right. So here's kind of, I'm going to say the coaching, we call it the coaching reality reframe. All right. So I've worked with partners who have said, you know what? I feel like I'm losing him in real time. And that's what it feels like. Okay. Now notice I said that's what it feels like. But what's actually happening is this. His system just doesn't know how to stay in closeness yet. Now, hopefully this individual is working on some things, and so they're getting better in small steps, but it doesn't happen overnight. So although those might feel like to you, like, oh man, I'm losing this person in real time, we're doing these things because we need to realize that his system just doesn't know how to stay in closeness yet or for long periods of time. That's why it's shutting down. And so your role is not to force it. Your role is not to fix it, but it is to try to continue to create an environment where staying actually becomes possible. Okay, so I'm trying to create the environment where staying becomes possible. Now you're actually doing this by actually listening to this because you're trying to dive a little bit more into the world of the male survivor to actually understand him. So I kind of want to leave you, I'm going to say, with this closing reflection. So if you've experienced this pattern, first of all, realize that you are not imagining it. It's a very, very common one, this whole idea of closeness. You didn't do something wrong. You didn't ruin the moment, but you did touch something that's real, something real. And it's something that's inside of that male survivor. It's something inside of him that just doesn't know how to stay there, doesn't know how to stay close, that often shuts down when it doesn't feel safe. Now, that doesn't mean that it's gone, but it doesn't also mean that it's unfamiliar. But this is where the healing actually begins. And so I want you, hopefully, maybe you took some notes or something. Those of you that are out there, feel free. As I always say, if you need to send me some email, whatever you have, some questions, feel free. And then I'll, try and talk about them on another podcast. I've had spouses, loved ones, they'll just say, hey, can I hire you for a few coaching sessions so I can get a better idea of how to work with this? You can do that also, whatever it is. But thank you so much for even just taking the first step of even just trying to understand, right? And because healing takes place not just with the survivor, but it also takes place with those that are in relationship with the survivor. And so what we're trying to do, we're trying to build that closeness so that everyone has an opportunity to experience and thrive in connection and in relationship. All right, guys, that's it for this one. For some reason, I'm losing my voice. I don't know. I think it's allergies or whatever, pollen flying around here. And in California, we're already starting the hot weather is here. We get a few cool days, but then it'll be jumping back up to the 80s and the 90s, and it's only March. So next time, we'll talk about, actually, maybe you have said to yourself in this relationship with the survivor, you know what? I just feel like I'm walking on eggshells. If that's you, then make sure that you stay in tune and that you're here with us next time for Unbroken. And remember, I always tell this to my survivors, remember, there's someone here who cares about you. And that's why I'm taking the time to even go through this, because I think that it's important. All right, guys, until our next podcast, be safe,